Hello everyone and Selamat Hari Raya. So sorry for a bit of the inconvenience and technical error, but we are still making this webinar happen and we will send you the recording, which is what you're watching right now, and also additional materials. I'm Iza and I'll be your host for today. So hope everyone is doing great. And to all my Muslim friends, hope you guys had a lovely Raya celebration at home with your loved ones. Thank you for signing up for the webinar and for joining us today. We hope that this session will be insightful and will be a very good one for you to get takeaways on how to improve your personal branding. So a quick introduction to DGX before we begin. DGX is Digi's venture builder arm. Our focus is to help Malaysian companies of all sizes solve problems by digitalizing their operations through our digital solutions, Alt HR, Omni Hotline, and iFleet. Today's webinar is run together with Image Revamp Consultancy. They are an image consultancy firm that aims to help men and women increase likability through better image, communication skills, and proper etiquette. Today, we have a very special guest, the founder of Image Revamp Consultancy, Ranukka Singham. Hi, and welcome, Ranukka.
Hi, thanks for having me again, guys. And nice to finally meet you, Iza.
Nice to meet you as well. So we are so happy to have you join us. And without further ado, I'll pass the floor over to you, Ranukka.
All right, awesome. So good morning once again, guys. And I guess this is the new normal, right? With technology, sometimes things can go a bit worry, but no worries. I hope this webinar would be as impactful as it was if it was live, right? So, but before we start, I just want to share with everyone that if you have gone through this webinar and you have any questions that you want to ask me, please feel free to reach out. I'll be happy to help in any ways possible. Right, so I'll be sharing on how to brand yourself right for a better future. This is something that's very close to my heart. I think a lot of people perhaps do not know too much about this, or rather not sure about when exactly to do it. So I'm here to kind of debunk some myths and share with you some facts on this. Yeah. So before that, I just want to introduce myself a little bit. I've been doing image and branding for some time now. I've helped over 8,000 individuals, particularly professionals, to help match their perception to their substance. I've done this for individuals as well as corporate clients, as you can see here below, for not just Malaysia, but all over the world, as far as the African continent. And the happy thing is that last year I was also nominated for the 100 most inspirational LinkedIn icons in Malaysia, year 2020. Yeah, so this is just a little bit of a snapshot of who I am. And yeah, if you're active on LinkedIn, please do find me up and connect as well. I will be happy to support one another in that platform. So just to set some expectations here, this is a 1 hour speaking engagement. It's not a training, it's not a workshop. So there would be some informations that are a little bit more on the superficial side. But if you want to have a bit more information, you can always reach out to me. But this is going to be the three main things that we'll be talking about. First thing is the big why. Why personal branding? Why right now? And most importantly, the question that I think a lot of people might not know is, what is personal branding, right? And once that's covered, we're going to go into the journey of how to enhance your brand, right? Where do you start? What do you need to know, right, when it comes to your brand? And the third thing is I'm going to leave you guys with some interesting tips on what you need to pay attention to in building your authority and influence, right? So we're going to go through all these three things in this 1 hour session. Okay, so the first thing I always like to ask my audience is this question here. What is your definition of personal branding, right? Of course, for you watching this right now in the comfort of your home, I think it would be really interesting for you to ponder on this as well, because what I realized is that personal branding, when you Google personal branding, most of the time you would see information pertaining to social media, pertaining to how it is online. And that's not wrong, but that's not the entire story here, right? So before I share with you what I feel or what I find personal branding is, it'll be good for you to just write this down, of what your understanding of personal branding is, and comparing to what I'm about to share with you, what's the difference that you can see here, yeah? So in my terms, the way how I see personal branding is I split it into three components, and the abbreviation of these components are A, B, and C, which is appearance, how you present yourself; behavior, how you interact, how you behave, what's your personality, your characteristics like; and C, communication, how eloquent you are when you're speaking to people, how well versed you are, how you speak, all of these things are included in communication. So how I see personal branding is really how you are in terms of the A, B, and C. Now, it doesn't just end here. One very important factor that many people don't realize is that these three factors need to be translated not just on your offline branding. That means when people see you face to face, it also needs to be translated in your online branding. Yeah, that means how people see you on your social media platforms, whichever that you're choosing. And the key thing that you have to remember is your offline and online brand has to be consistently the same, if not similar, right? It is really detrimental to your personal brand if people experience you very different in different platforms. Yeah. Example, I've seen many individuals this way where their online brand, right? Example, in LinkedIn, it was really amazing. They look like superstars, influencers. Wow, right? But when I meet them offline, it's a totally different story altogether, and that is really detrimental to your personal brand because essentially it's what we call social media catfishing, where you kind of look a certain way online and you do not look that way offline. So you've got to make sure that it is consistent, right? So on this note, I also want to share a very important steps or journey that you need to take when it comes to your personal brand. Now, how I see it is using these four key steps here. The first thing that you need to understand about your personal brand is that everyone and anyone will build a certain first impression towards you. Now, what does first impression means? It means in that first few seconds of them encountering you, whether you have said anything or not, it's just that first few seconds, the first impression that someone has of you. Is it good? Is it bad? What do they think of you immediately? So that's what first impression means. And that, right, is actually quite vital in personal branding because a lot of times there's a saying that you don't get a second chance to build your first impression. So sometimes if your first impression is already pretty bad, it takes you a lot more effort and energy to kind of overcome that horrible first impression that you have given. So the first thing you always want to look at is what is the first impression that you're giving people, right? Now, once that's established, the next thing you need to look into is your perception. That means when you're starting to talk, when you're interacting with someone, what is how likable are you? So perception talks about likability, how much people like you, how positive people feel about you. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that they would work with you or not, but generally, are they comfortable with you? So that's what perception really gives. Now, a lot of individuals, whether they're in corporate or in business or whatever, not always stop here. They feel that as long as I am likable, as long as people find me comfortable, I think that's good enough, right? But in today's world, it isn't. Okay, regardless of where you are in your career, whether you're in corporate, whether you're owning a business, freelance, you're a university student, it is not enough because there's a lot of people in your space, right? So there's a lot of equally talented people in your space. So you need to now start thinking about creating a unique brand. What is so special about you that if I were to put you and someone else with an equal education level, equal background, equal experience, what would make you stand out? So this is something that everyone needs to think about. Personal branding is a very personal journey, right? So what is something about you so unique that you're so different from the others? Something to think about, right? But here's the thing. When you craft your unique brand, it is important to always stay authentic and be truthful about it. That means you're not creating a unique brand that you feel is sellable, but it's not essentially you. Because if you do that, then you're not able to maintain point number 4, which is consistency, right? If you're trying to maintain a certain facade that is not you at all, you're really trying your best, and faking it till you make it. Chances are, in the end, you would get really exhausted, and you're not able to maintain consistency, and people can see through that. So this is the 4 things that you really need to look into when it comes to your personal branding. Now, in these 4 parts here, the first thing I always tell people that you need to start looking into in terms of personal branding is actually appearance positioning. How do you present yourself? The way you present yourself, is it relevant to whatever that you're doing? Is it relevant to the objective that you're trying to portray here, right? Despite the fact that many intellectuals will always tell me that, I don't care how I look as long as I have the substance. I think this particular statement does not work in today's current age. It is such a pity when I see individuals with amazing substance, really smart, but not able to portray themselves well, hence not getting the opportunity that they deserve, right? So the first thing I always talk about is looking at your appearance positioning, right? The second thing is now looking into behavioral development, understanding yourself. What's your personality style like, right? And then understanding how do you identify different personalities around you, right? So how in order to do that, you need to also have observational skills, and with that, you are able to customize the way you communicate with people, which brings us to the third point here, right? Communication skills. Now, once that's all settled and done, the next thing, of course, is to ensure your online and your offline brand is consistently similar, if not the same. All right. So this is actually a very important skill set that everyone needs to understand on, because every time I speak to a new prospective client about their interest in going to personal branding, they always tell me that, I really want to make something out of myself. I really want to brand myself, but I really don't know where to start. And when that happens and you do not get a good information of where to begin, what step one like, the likelihood of you imitating someone is very high. And this is what I see with a lot of people in the industry, where you imitate the person that you feel is most popular in your industry, but essentially that person's brand might not necessarily be your true self, a true reflection of you. So something you need to think about when it comes to personal branding. Yeah. So I always share this very unconventional statement. People like people who are like themselves. So personal branding is not just about creating something unique about you. That's important, of course, but it's also creating a brand that is relevant. Relevant to what? Relevant to who, right? This is something we need to discover as well. But you need to understand that as long as your brand is not relevant to the right people, it is also useless, right? So that's why there's multiple things that you need to consider when it comes to crafting your personal brand. Now, a question I always like to ask the crowd as well is, when do you think is the best time to focus on developing your brand? So a lot of times, the most common answers I always get is, okay, I'm only going to focus on my brand when I'm transitioning from one career to another. I'm only going to focus on my brand if I want to get promoted, or I'm only going to focus on my brand if I suddenly become an entrepreneur. So those answers are not wrong, but they're not entirely the main full picture here, right? So the ideal thing about personal branding is it doesn't matter where you are. You could be a fresh grad, going for your interview. You could be someone that's transitioning from a particular industry to another, yeah, something very drastic, like myself, right? Maybe I haven't shared in the earlier part. Before I was doing personal branding or image, I'm actually an optometrist by profession, so I've always been in the healthcare industry for the past I think 10 years. Yeah. So the change of industry was also very drastic, right? From healthcare to branding, right? And so when you change industries, the way how you brand yourself could be different, right? So that's one of the examples. The third thing is, even if you're an employee in an organization, personal branding also is important. Now, contrary to what a lot of people believe, if you're an employee in an organization, I've often hear people say that if you're an employee, you shouldn't focus on personal branding. You should just follow what the company wants you to do. I would say I kind of disagree with that statement, because imagine, take me for example. When I was in corporate, the organization that I worked for, sorry, was a really big organization. That we had like about 300 to 400 people in the whole building. Imagine being in a sea full of talents, right? So many people equally the same level as you, maybe some higher. How do you really stand out though? Like, how do you have career progression if you do not know how to brand yourself well? So in that element, I think personal branding still applies to people who are under employment, right? And the third thing, the next thing is freelancing. Right now, with the gig community, I think personal branding is definitely very applicable to you guys as well. And even if you are the CEO of a company, or you're sitting in a board of directors, I think I know that you've already made it, and there is no need to constantly brand yourself, but branding yourself for the purpose of visibility is also important. And of course, the last thing is if you own a company, you are an entrepreneur, you're a business owner, I think, of course, that without say, personal branding is really important to you, right? So, whichever stage that you're in, personal branding is something you need to really look into. But a word of advice that I always share with everyone is that your personal brand is fluid. This means that whatever that you're crafting, the brand that you're crafting for yourself right now could be different from the brand that you need to craft 5 years later, because you would be in different stages of your life and you need to relook into different components of it, right? So you have to consider this. I mean, whatever example, let's say you're a fresh grad right now and you're looking for a job, the way how you brand yourself versus when, I don't know, 6 to 7 years down the road, you become a people manager is very different. So you need to understand the concept of this fluidity so that you would not feel like, am I just going to be stuck in this mold? You're not. Yeah, you need to understand there needs to be a fluidity in that sense, but certain elements we would still need to keep it consistent. Okay, so I have 4 questions here that I would like everyone to maybe list down. And this would help you in your journey of discovering yourself a little bit. So these are the 4 questions that I always ask my clients when it comes to personal branding. The first thing I always ask is, what is your status quo right now? What is your current brand telling people? Okay. And if you don't know that, the easiest way is to ask, right? Ask your colleagues, ask your friends around you, ask this question. If you had to describe me in one word, what would it be? And that would give you a very good idea of how people associate you with a certain thing, right? Now, some of you might feel that, hey, I haven't even started crafting my brand. What is there to say? But here's the thing, right? Even if you do it consciously or unconsciously, you have a personal brand, whether you like it or not. So the problem here is if you are not crafting it well, it is a brand that is naturally there. That means, that that's why there's a saying that, if you don't brand yourself right, someone else will do it for you, right? So ask people around you, get genuine, honest feedback. What is the one thing that they can associate you with? When they think of you, what do they think of? This gives you your current status quo. Now, the answers that you hear might be things that you like, maybe, or maybe things that surprise you, right? For me, example, when I was in corporate, the one thing that I oftentimes hear people telling me is that my brand is someone that's distant and reserved. I seem to be someone that's very too reserved for people's liking, and therefore it's really hard to build rapport with me. So that was a brand that I was associated with. Did that surprise me? Yes. I like to think that I'm a friendly person, right? Like, how did that even happen? So understanding this will give you an overview of like where your gaps are. Why is it the way how you see yourself versus the way how other people see you is different, right? So write this down. This is your first step. Now, the second thing you now need to also list down is the industry that you're in. Where are you right now? And generally, in terms of your industry, what's the general sense or the general feel about people in your industry? Okay. Why do I say that? Is because your industry is very relevant to how you present yourself. Now, certain industries are, of course, definitely a lot more creative, a lot more new, example, startups, right? And there are certain industries up until now still maintain a level of traditionalism, right? It's very corporate, it's very traditional. So if you were to present yourself really like in a very creative, funky way, you will not be able to blend in into that industry. And sometimes that can have a very detrimental effect to your personal brand. So list down the industry that you're in and what's the general sense of the feel of people in this industry. Are they a little bit more laid back? Are they a little bit more conservative? Are they a bit more casual? Write this down. Okay. Now, after you've done second point, this is where requires you to have a bit of reflection and thought too. Write down the people you serve. So what does the people you serve mean? It's basically people who need or would be important to see your personal brand change. So people you serve might not necessarily be just clients. It could be people you work with, whether it's your subordinates, your peers, your boss, or even like an interdepartmental sort of like colleague, right? Anyone that you are in close counter with. This is what we mean by people you serve. Now, how do you really write this down? This is how you define people that you serve, right? So I usually use this client avatars method, where you can actually list them down based on this. Now, of course, people that you serve might be of a variety of types, right? But what I want you to do right now is to think about the most common type of people you serve. Generally speaking, what kind of industry or occupation they fall into? What's their age group like? Their level of education? And of course, the last thing is, when you think of these people that you serve, what's the one thing that comes to your mind about them? Yeah, it could be you say that, it's basically people you serve are doctors, example, and their age group is maybe in their 30s to 40s. Level of education is, of course, medical doctors, so you have a medical degree. The first thing that comes to mind is that these people are professional, very knowledgeable, and they want answers right, and they want someone trustable, something like that. So list this down, because this will give you an idea when you craft your brand. As much as you want to input uniqueness about yourself in there, you need to consider your external factors as well, which in this case involves people that really need to see this brand. Yeah, people that will be affected by this brand. Okay, right. And once that's all done, the last part, you have all this information from one, two, and three. Now you need to consider what's the perception that you really want to create. That means when people see you, interact with you, get in close contact with you, what's the one thing that you want them to have in their mind when they see you? Okay, that's one way of looking at it. The second way is, if someone were to ask a colleague of yours, hey, what do you think of XYZ, right? What do you think of you, right? And the one sentence that they will say about you, what do you want that sentence to be? Because that's a very defining moment, and how you craft your brand really relies a lot on this. Okay, and this is also in some ways, a visualization method. When you're able to visualize how people would perceive you, it's easier right now to work backwards and craft that story as well, right? So write down in more specificity. I would say in this exercise for number 4 here, do not just write professional, or I want to be seen trustable, full stop. Write it as a sentence, write it as an emotion base. I want people to feel, when they engage me or when they interact with me, a certain sense of trustability. They know what I'm doing. Example, right? So be as specific as you can be in this point here, right? So once you have actually gotten into that mode, you have actually answered all 4 questions. I would now want to share with you what are some easy ways to get started. All right. So when it comes to personal brand, as I mentioned earlier on, you do have your online brand and your offline brand as well, right? So which one to focus first, it really depends on you. Which one is more of a level of importance based on where you are right now in your career, right? So whichever that you choose to focus on, make sure that the other one follows through. That means, let's say if you're focusing on your online brand first, example, LinkedIn, right? Like for me, I coach on LinkedIn as well. If you're focusing on LinkedIn a lot more and you want to craft your LinkedIn brand story well, that's fine. But after you've done that, make sure that how people are going to experience you offline, or even how people are experiencing you on video, on virtual calls, on Zoom, example, is consistently the same. Yeah, I know I sound like I'm really long-winded when I keep on saying you have to be consistently the same, but trust me when I say I have seen enough to tell you that a lot of people don't realize the importance of it. Okay, so if let's say you're going to look at your online branding first, these are the 3 things I want you to really look into. And just a disclaimer here as well, I am not a pro in every single social media platforms. My platform of choice and my forte is actually LinkedIn. Yeah, so I'm going to share with you from a perspective of how you want to craft your LinkedIn, your entire LinkedIn personal brand, right? So the first thing you want to really look into is the first impression of your social media platform. In this case, I'm talking about LinkedIn, right? So what does first impression mean? It means when people look at your profile, your picture, your banner, your header, that first feel itself, right, gives people a positive vibe, gives people a level of likability, right? And even better is that when people see your picture, they can immediately translate and understand what your brand is all about. Yeah. If you have a chance to look at my LinkedIn profile picture, you would notice that my picture is really with a white, I'm wearing white, the background, the lighting, and the way how I'm smiling. I'm trying to portray myself as someone that's approachable and friendly, which I am. But you see, if you remember what I shared in question one, the status quo that most people tell me is that I seem distant. So I needed to make sure that my picture showcases my true personality. All right. So that's the first thing you want to look into. The second thing is gaining visibility by engaging. Now, a lot of people go into LinkedIn thinking that, I'm going to be a person of authority, a subject matter expert, simply by just posting contents. And that's not the full picture again, right? The best way to subtly build visibility as well as influence in LinkedIn is actually by engaging. So LinkedIn works as a very supportive platform where if you support me, I will in turn support you back. So the best way to also be done in a very strategic way is to engage the right content. So sometimes if you see a really good content, writing a really impactful comment is so valuable, because when you write that, not only does the author of the post see it, but the connections from the author, this particular person, would also see your comments, and that will actually strike visibility. People will start wondering, oh, who is this person that's commenting this really intelligent comment, example, right? So gaining visibility through engagement really helps you to secure in influence and authority in your social media platforms, right? And the third thing is, of course, the style and substance of your content. Before you think about what sort of content you want to put out on LinkedIn, you need to now look back at your point number 4, the perception you want to really create here, the industry that you're in, example. So using all of this information, think about the target audience that you want to reach out in LinkedIn, right? What kind of content would really appeal to them? And while you're writing this content, the style of how you write, right, would it showcase the perception you want to provide? Right? Example, if you want to be seen as someone that's helpful, that's approachable, the way how you write it versus someone that is maybe a bit more shut down, a bit more sarcastic, would sound very different, right? So these things, right, require a lot of thought before you even write it. So writing content is not just about the content itself, the substance itself, but rather the style of how you convey it really showcases whether you have whether you are able to build influence and authority, right? So this is really on your online branding itself. Now, once you've done up your online personal brand, you're okay. Now you want to follow through with your offline stuff. This is the 3 things that you want to focus on. The first one is appearance, because the A, B, and C's, right? So in terms of appearance, I always like to kind of summarize it into the 3 C's. One is color. So you'll be very surprised to know that colors really bring about a variety of perceptions that people would feel about you. Now, the good news is, after this call, after this webinar, I will be getting the help of Digi to send over a color chart where it would tell you what different colors represent, and that would give you a good idea, based on the perception you want to create, what sort of colors would be really more suited to you to wear to kind of amplify that entire perception, right? And then the second thing is contrast. Contrast means that, example, if you're wearing a blazer, the blouse and the blazer, the contrast between these 2 items, right? What does that tell you? So the higher the contrast, the more memorable you are. The lower the contrast, the more approachable you seem. All right. So high contrast would be, example, if you're wearing a blazer and a shirt, black suit with a white shirt, that's high contrast. Gray suit with a light blue shirt, that's low contrast. So that's what contrast means, right? And the third thing is clothing fit. Now, everything is pointless if whatever you're wearing does not fit you well, does not look polished, doesn't look very put together. So a lot of times, and this is a special message for those of you who feel that, as long as I have substance, that's good enough. I don't really matter. It doesn't really matter how I look. I want to just tell you, regardless of whatever position you're in, whether even you're internally in IT or where you're externally client facing, it matters. Yeah, it truly matters. And I can begin to tell you how many people that come to me after learning this hard truth, right? Because if you have, example, been in an internal non-client facing role for a very long time, and you think that it's fine for me to wear, my hoodie and my jeans to work, that's good and well. But when it comes to a point where you want to transition into maybe a different position in the company, and then you now start to think that, I want to dress better, it's a little bit too late, because everyone in their mind has already ingrained a certain perception of you, right? So, in order to kind of counter that, you want to really focus on this as early as you can. Yeah, so clothing fit is one of it. Now, second and the third point is behavior and communication. So I always want to share with people these three things that I often tell my clients. First thing is, you always, in any path of your career you're in, you always want to be known for something. Now, being known for something doesn't mean being known for any skill sets or technical abilities. It could also be being known for a particular personality, particular characteristics. Of course, that needs to be positive, right? But having this particular part, right, being known for something here, whether it's your skill sets, whether it's your personality, whatever it is, right, in a very positive light, is really important. Because if you're known for this and consistently everyone thinks that you're known for this particular thing, everyone agrees with it, it helps to kind of subconsciously build that brand. Yeah, so when people think of you, they think of this particular trait. So that's very, very important. Okay. The second point about this is, never be a wallflower or a clown. Wallflower basically is like, example, if you're going to a meeting, nobody even knows that you're in the meeting. And a clown is when you're in a meeting, everyone knows that you're in a meeting, right? So either one is actually detrimental to your personal brand. And I'm going to share with you why. Because why do I want to say this is that many people think, if in order to stand out, I need to speak up. In order to stand out, I need to be the loudest in the room. And that is not true at all. Because sometimes, if you don't say a lot, but when you say something, it creates a lot of weight, that's even more impactful than, buzzing in lots of, chiming in lots of things in the meeting itself. So my key point, or a tip that I always share with my clients is, the best way when you're in a meeting or any kind of forums or whatnot, always ask a question. Never leave without saying anything. Of course, that's really bad. But always prepare yourself so that you're able to ask at least one question, a very impactful question, of course, in a meeting, so that in that sense you are seen as someone who is knowledgeable, very influential. Yeah, you have a level of knowledge about this, right? And when it comes to being a clown, I mean, if that is truly your personality, that you're loud, you're boisterous, and you want to continue that, fine, no problem at all. But I'm just saying that sometimes you need to also read the room, right? Not everybody appreciates that sort of personality. Yeah, so understanding people around you, that's one of the skill sets that always in personal branding we need to hone on, which is behavioral skill sets. All right. And then the third one, of course, is articulation, right? The way how you articulate things. If you can articulate well, the way you speak, really goes a long way. Sometimes you would notice that language, unfortunately, is the biggest barrier that separates someone who is very visible and someone who isn't. When I was working in corporate, I used to always share this story where I had an ex-colleague who was brilliant. I mean, she was really, really smart, and even if I had any problems, I would ask her, right? But unfortunately, command of English wasn't really her strongest suit, and because of that, she couldn't really express herself very well. And whenever there's any meetings with senior management, she always gets she always goes unnoticed. And that's where I realized that, wow, the way how you speak, the way how you articulate yourself, of course with substance, right? Not just sharing out of the sake of sharing, but the way how you speak and articulate yourself well really goes a long way. And so if you have this sort of barrier, if language is not your strongest pursuit, get some help, right? Get someone to help you with your English. Even for us in Image Revamp, we have communication coaching, to help people kind of understand how to convey the message well, so that whatever substance that you have, you're able to express it so eloquently and so well with charisma. Yeah. So these are the few steps I think it's really important to kind of gear yourself. If you're thinking, year 2021, this is the year that I want to talk about my personal brand, then these are some of the tips, as well as the questions I shared with you earlier on, that you want to start thinking about when it comes to your personal brand. Because personal brand is such a wide, it's such a vague word, right? It's a big spectrum. What I realize is, a lot of people, as much as they want to do this, they don't know what they don't know where to start also, right? So at least this gives you a bit of a simple framework to know where to begin. Okay, now here's something that I would like to provide to everyone here. If you're really interested and if you like what you have just heard, I actually do provide complimentary 30-minute sessions. It's more to give you some sort of clarity and answer any kind of challenges that you have and point you to the right direction, depending on what you really need help on in terms of your personal brand. So because of time, I'm also rather busy in this sense. I'm only able to provide 15 signups for this. So please do take this opportunity. And if you're actually after the call and you really want to sign up with me on a program, there's also further promotions for people who have participated from this particular webinar. Yeah. So that's all from my side. And if you have any questions that perhaps after this webinar, you have like a lot of things in your mind and you want to get downloaded and you want to ask, please do connect with me on LinkedIn and I'll be happy to, address anything that you have, any concerns you have. All right. So that's all from my side. And thank you once again, Digi, for having me.
Okay, thank you so much for the insight. It was very, eye-opening to think about personal branding and how people want to perceive me. And I'm sure a lot of us who are watching this are also very excited to, craft our own personal brand as well. So
Yeah.
since we can't have a live Q&A, I figured that I would ask a few questions that I
Okay.
think other people might be curious as well, that maybe you can help us answer. So,
Sure.
once we've done, crafting our personal brand online and offline, is there a way to measure the success of our own personal branding? Like, how do we know if,
Oh,
how we are being perceived is what we want to be perceived as?
oh, that's actually a very good question. I think there isn't any KPI to quantify that, but rather it's more of like, I think, gauging it from people's point of view, people around you. So sometimes it's always good, right? Like example, if you have met someone from online and then when you start talking to them, when you meet them offline, right, it's always good to ask this question, like, by the way, just out of curiosity, right? Do I seem the same to you, online and offline? Yeah, so that's what I always do with my clients. I always tell them that I've seen you online, I've seen your LinkedIn profile, and now that I'm seeing you on maybe a Zoom call, I find you similar, right? I can totally see this is how you are. So then it at least tells me that there's consistency throughout both.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's a nice way to kind of gauge. You just be straight up and ask people who you've met
yeah,
and see what they think of you and if you're similar to how you appear online as well. That's nice.
yeah,
Okay, so on the ABCs, right? Appearance, behavior, and communication. First impressions really matter. And I've heard some people say that handshakes can be very important. If you have a
yeah.
firm handshake, that means you're very good. If you have like sort of like a softer handshake, you're not giving a good impression. So what are your thoughts and what are some of like the surefire tips to make sure that we are giving a good first impression to people?
Oh, all right. So I think first things first is that, before you meet someone, right? I think you need to have kind of like you need to anticipate some things like, okay, when I meet this person, right, what's the first impression I want to give this person, right? And then you work backwards from there. So when it comes to the ABCs, right, one is of course dressing the part and dressing appropriately for the occasion. I think that's very, very important. That's where the first impression always is, right? The appearance part, looking the part, right? The second thing, like what you mentioned about handshakes, this all falls in under body language, which is under behavior, right? Yeah. So even not just your handshake, but rather your posture, how you are standing, how you smile, how you shake someone's hand, how you continue the conversation, how you walk. All of these things, right, are included into that first impression. Granted that you only have 7 to 15 seconds, I would say, to build that kind of to build that kind of first impression. Yeah,
Okay, 7 to 15 seconds is very short. So
very short.
imagine,
Yeah,
that's why, the first impressions really, really matter in the first few seconds. Okay,
correct.
so I think this would be like my last question. So how can anyone make their personal brand stand out if they are not, well known or not super successful in the beginning, and even after trying to engage and being more engaging, especially online, they're still not getting noticed, or their personal branding they feel like is still lacking. What advice would you give to people who are still struggling despite trying all of the tips?
Right. I think okay, first things first, right? I just want to also kind of share this important concept. Right, getting your personal branding right might give you success or popularity, but that shouldn't be the end goal. You know what I mean? Like if you're popular, okay, that's a bonus, you know. But most importantly is the people that really need to see that brand. Are they experiencing it right? That's very important here. But if you feel that, you know, whatever that you are setting out to achieve, you're not getting it, then I suppose, right, something in the mix of it, right, the questions that you're asking yourself, something is not telling right. Or rather, your personal brand is maybe a bit too conservative, a little bit too, I would say, you're not going out too much, in a sense where you're still blending in, you're still being like a bit of a wallflower. So there are a lot of elements that I always look into. I do have people that come to me where I can see that they have tried, and I love people like that because as long as, because you have already tried your best, you've already gone through the whole works, we now understand where your problem is, and we can just simply just rectify these problems, and it will be better, you know. Rather than people who start from the beginning, that's good as well, but when you don't know what you don't know, right, it takes a bit more time for a consultant to also help you in that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Thank you so much for answering those questions, Renuka, and for the very, very great presentation. We've all learned a lot. So that is actually all the time that we have today for the webinar. If you are watching this and you have any burning questions that we weren't able to address, feel free to reach out to Renuka via LinkedIn. So I will also share her LinkedIn profile link in the email as well. Or you can also drop us an email and will be happy to relay the questions back to Renuka. So over on Renuka's LinkedIn page, she shares a lot of insights about personal branding, and it's very inspiring to see how she brands herself as well on LinkedIn. So do check her out. Okay, so we'll also be sharing additional materials like the color chart of, you know, what colors suit the kind of perception you want to give people. All of that will be sent to you as well if you didn't receive it in this email with the recording. So thank you so much everyone for watching. Sincere apologies again that we couldn't do this live, but we hope that you enjoyed the session. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and see you soon. Thank you.
All right.
Bye-bye.
See you guys. Bye.